Hi there, I'm Ken Lammers. This is Commonplace Catholic, and this week we're going to talk about my reading project for Lent. That was John Henry Newman's Apologia Pro Vita Sua. So, well, let's get to it.
Lord Jesus Christ.
युगान युग तेरा ही है.
Ilekroć bowiem sprawujemy pamiątkę ofiary Chrystusa.
Kweli ni vema na haki tukushukuru daima na popote, Bwana Baba mwema.
主の御体と御血になりますように。
Okay, so as one of my things I was doing this year for Lent, I guess I still have a few days of Lent left, but I was reading Apologia Pro Vita Sua. Now, while I own the book, right, I will admit to you I mainly read it on a Kindle, and it is, for those of you who don't know, an autobiography written by John Henry Newman about his life. And John Henry Newman has been, I think, recently declared a saint. He was a cardinal in the Catholic Church, a priest in the Catholic Church. He before that was a priest in the Anglican Church. He converted, and he was 19th century. He was an educator. He was a theologian. He was a priest. He was the man, right? And there was a lot of fussing over the fact that he converted to Catholicism. Approximately, I think, 5 years before before the Vatican actually reestablished bishops in England or in the United Kingdom. So, that's a pretty big step, to be honest with you. Now, there's basically three parts of this book. The first part you can ignore. It's like the first two chapters. He's writing about this man named Kingsley who wrote, I don't know if it was a book, a booklet, or a pamphlet or what, claiming that evil things from John Henry Newman, that he was bad and evil and that all this sort of stuff, and trying to go through the writings of John Henry Newman and point it out, right? Point out because he's Catholic, this is bad, and therefore John Henry Newman is bad. And Newman is like, wow, there's just so much wrong here. I'm just going to give my autobiography. That pretty much, in a nutshell, is the first two chapters. There's more to it than that. Newman is obviously rear end hurt when he does this. But we get into the autobiography. And I got to tell you, reading this is not as easy. I mean, you don't have to be a professor to read it. But on the other hand, it's not particularly the easiest read I've ever had. It writes in an older style, more roundabout ways, that sort of thing. It just assumes you know more about English history than I do or did, and particularly about that 19th century time early on. And it does some of the things that drive you nuts about English academics or more older English academics. In particular, it does the thing where they write along in English and then they switch to another language for a line or three or four words or one place a paragraph, and they switch back to English, and they do not bother to give you a translation or an explanation. They just assume you know, right? This was a English academic thing. You can find all sorts of serious writings where they do that with German, French, Latin, seen it with Hebrew. Think I saw it now. Those are ones I can remember seeing, and they just assume you know, because if you are, of course, with the proper people, you will know this, right? And I unfortunately am not the proper people. I did take Latin in high school and run into it. Obviously, as Catholic, I run into it every so often, but I am not, I'm not anywhere near fluent, right? So there were times where I'm sitting there reading, and then I've got my tablet here going, with Google Translate going to figure out what was being said, right? Not too often, not enough to spoil the whole thing, but enough that, it made it a more difficult read. But having said that, for the autobiographical biography of it, you go through, and I'll admit, I was somewhat disappointed, right? He's not really dishing dirt per se. He's defending his life. So he's not out, not doing a dishing dirt thing. And to be honest with you, because of the writing in that, you would probably get more out of reading the Wikipedia page, right, than you would out of reading this about his life and seeing how amazingly awesome he is. Particularly in part of this, he does downplay how important he was to certain things in the Anglican Church and now Catholic. Um, so let's go through a little bit and just in bare bones lay out what his life was. Okay, in the mid 1810s, 1810, 1815, 1816, something like that, he's already Anglican and decided to become a priest, as I understand. But he gets the Reform bug, right? The Calvinist bug. And he is on the Protestant, we're going to all be Protestants side of the Anglican Church for a while, right? Now he grows out of that, right? And in the 1830s, early 1830s, I think 1833, he sees a speech given by someone who is what would be called an Anglo-Catholic, right? And he, from that moment on, is part of that Anglo-Catholic. It's a group that had different names: the Oxford Movement, the Anglo-Catholics, the Tractarians, because they wrote tracts all the time. It was their version of social media, right? And of course, he said what he was trying to accomplish was the via media, the middle way, right? And what they were trying to say is this: look, we're not with them. We are not Calvinists. We are not Lutheran. We're not with them. And so we are Catholic. Now, we're not Catholic under Rome, but we are in the apostolic succession. So, we're here. We reject leadership from Rome. Our bishops lead us, not Rome. We don't believe in all this Mary and saints and all that sort of stuff. And I recall, I think the last thing was no transubstantiation, right? We're not there with all that. But we are a Catholic faith. We're not with them Protestant folks. They should stay over there and mind their own business, right? That was their position. And they wrote a whole lot of stuff about this and did a whole lot of sermons and orations and stuff trying to get the Anglican Church, the Anglican Church is over here, and they're here trying to get them to be Catholic, right? Anglo-Catholic, for lack of a better term. And this goes on for a while, and in the end, before the end of it all, he is doing some research, taking a break from all this argument net. John Henry Newman is doing some research on monophysitic heresy, right? This is the nature of Jesus, right? And as Nicaeans, we believe that it's fully man, fully God, right? And fully man, fully God, not any intermix. They are both there. We are Nicene Christians in the West, as are the Eastern Orthodox. I don't think the Oriental Orthodox are. I think they believe that fully man on the outside, but inside is God, right? Or at least the two natures are mixed, and of course God is more powerful than the human nature. Something along those lines. I realize I'm not getting that in 100% theologically correct, but close enough. The thing he realizes, he's like, whoa, it looks like the Catholics are right here, right? And it shakes him, right? And he gets this out of St. Augustine, and there's a phrase that people who talk about Newman will repeat this phrase: securus judicat orbis terrarum. Securus judicat orbis terrarum. Secure is the world in its judgment, right? And you'll find that translated a whole bunch of different ways, many of them much looser. But that is, it's part of a larger tract, larger section by Augustine, who was arguing against a heresy group and saying, look, we're here. We figured it out. you're wrong. We are secure in our judgment. The Catholic Church, the majority of people are secure in the judgment. And this hits home. This is a torpedo shot right into Newman, and he is bothered by this a lot. But he gets past it, moves on, and goes on, and he's still writing things. He's writing these tracts, and it is 1841. He writes tract number 90. And tract number 90, he goes back into the founding documents of the Anglican Church and goes, look, they may have thought they were being Protestant, but they're Catholic, and you can look at all these things, and it's Catholic. They need to be interpreted Catholic. We need to be, on the Catholic side, and that's it. They've had enough. His bishop has had enough. All the bishops have had enough, and the Anglican bishops have had enough, and they. His bishop silences him, right? Says, look, your tract can be published. You can still sell it. You cannot defend it. You cannot do anything about it. You can't talk about it, but you can still sell it. And almost immediately, he goes into basically exile, right? Not like he's thrown out of the country or anything, but he's not, where he normally was. He goes off into the countryside, really. And he understands, at least according to his autobiography, that there's a gentleman's agreement here. He won't defend it, but they won't attack it. Which, of course, almost instantly, the Anglican bishops, start attacking it. Because, again, remember, they're over here, wanting to be more Protestant, and his folks are over here saying, no, we're not them. And so they attack it rigorously. He's still allowed to sell it, but he can't defend it. And that obviously causes him pain. He is not happy about that. And that, combined with a founding of a bishopric, basically setting a bishop in, it was the Holy Land or Jerusalem particularly, I'm not sure, but it was that area. And he's like, look, there are 4 Anglicans in that whole area, maybe. What they intend to do is like grab the Lutherans and the Calvins and drag them into the Anglican Church and then build their Anglican Church that way. And he's like, and this is like an epiphany for him. He's like, look, it's not a church. We're just a department of the British government. We're not here trying to do anything religious. We're just trying to spread England and make it a more powerful nation around the world. We are just a department of the British government. Now, that's his. He's still kind of adrift, and he is there until 1845. In 1845, he decides that he's done, right? He stops being a priest for the Anglican Church, and he goes and converts to Catholicism. He's done, right? Now, again, this is 5 years before the Pope reestablishes the Catholic Church in England when he's doing this. So, this is a big, big step. And he's there, and, then that's when the book ends, the autobiography ends. And there's more interesting things that went on in his life. He wrote a number of books and things that were important. He helped found a university in Ireland. He was sued for libel. There was a guy who claimed, who had been a priest or a brother in the Catholic Church and got in trouble for sexual exploits or something, and then he left and then started saying that the Catholics were evil incarnate and they were doing all this sort of stuff. So he was a tool that was being used basically in the Anglican Church to attack Catholicism. And John Henry Newman goes, relying on somebody else's work that he trusted, says, no, this is all BS. This guy's a clown, right? And this guy sues John Henry Newman. And as it goes, um, as I understand it, the guy who John Henry Newman had relied upon couldn't find the papers that he had used and evidence he had until too late to get to him for the trial. But Newman's attorneys went and got actual witnesses, except of course when they went to trial, the judge would not let any of these witnesses testify. Absolutely refused. It would not let them testify. And I'll tell you, with that kind of handicap, his attorneys still must have been pretty amazing, because apparently they won all but one of like 38, 39 charges. And the one charge, he was found guilty and given a fine. Apparently, the judge, showing a good bit of bias, when he put out the sentence and everything for John Henry Newman, lectured him on how he had fallen down morally and everything else since he had moved from being an Anglican to a Catholic. And there was apparently a good deal of embarrassment about this in the papers and among Protestant elites, going, oh, that was just so bad. That was so bad, the whole thing. So all that, of course, that's not included in the book. All that would have been very interesting things to read about. Of course, we have to find that elsewhere. But he did really kind of interesting and amazing things as a Catholic priest, and then was made a cardinal, and then died, and eventually becomes a saint. But so we get through his autobiography. His autobiography is, okay. Like I said, you could probably get better information by reading the Wikipedia page, better and more clear information by reading the Wikipedia page. But then you get to an appendix. In the appendix, he goes, okay, this is where I'm going to refute Mr. Kingsley point for point. And he doesn't really do it that way, but he starts doing it. He does it in part. And it is petty. This is proof that just because somebody was a priest, a cardinal, and becomes a saint, doesn't mean he's perfect, because this section is petty. He goes through and goes, Mr. Kingsley said this, and he's wrong, blot 1. Mr. Kingsley said that, and he's wrong, blot 2. And he actually says things arguing against them, some of which I don't know that I really understood, because it was things of the time that I didn't have the history for. But he does that, and again, it's like 40 of them that he does that. Blot 1, blot 2, blot 3, and it is petty, right? So I almost didn't read this, but it is the section that really needs to be read, because in here he starts talking about theological things, right? What actually, basically, from what I understand, Mr. Kingsley's claim is at some point, maybe from the beginning, maybe sometime later, John Henry Newman actually became a Catholic, or was very strongly leaning Catholic, and was trying to turn everybody else Catholic, right? Or as many as he could. Keep in mind, this is before the Catholic Church was established in England, again, reestablished in England. So it appears to be his claim. I have not read Mr. Kingsley's writing. I'm sure you can find it on the internet if you want to read it yourself. Go for it. What first caught my attention, though, is a little bit in, he starts talking about miracles. And he kind of sets up this straw man. Protestants don't believe that miracles exist anymore. They think that miracles ended at Christ rising from the grave, going into heaven, right? That's it. Miracles are done. There are no more miracles. This is an important theological point, an argument that you would have if you were trying to refute Catholicism, because Catholics believe that a miracle happens every time there's Mass, right? The priest holds up the bread. This is my body, which will be given up for you. And the bread transforms into the body of Christ, right? Does the same thing with the cup. And the wine transforms into the blood of Christ, right? there's a miracle every week in Mass. If you're Protestant, you want to refute that. So he goes on, it's like, look, and of course there's all these claims about miracles from this and that saint, and it talks about how, Catholics are just gullible for this kind of thing. And his point, and I'm going to read this a little bit so I get it kind of right. Catholics believe miracles are positively likely because when God begins, he goes on. What has been will be. In other words, God was doing miracles all through the Old Testament. God did the great miracle, born, died, resurrected, went to heaven. That's the great miracle. But why would that end anything? Protestant assumption that miracles ended at that point has no basis, right? So Catholics believe that miracles exist. Catholics don't necessarily believe that everything that's called a miracle is a miracle. There needs to be some proof, and he goes through that a little bit too. But we tend, if you show us a book and it says that a monk from 5 centuries ago did 10 miracles, some of them might be wrong, some of them might be right, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Because we believe the miracles. So that was an interesting part to read, and that got me hooked further. I went further in, and really he hits the argument, right? There was a thing where Catholics were believed to not tell the truth, right? And it was because we evil Catholics were trying to convert everybody to Catholicism by hook or by crook. And apparently Mr. Kingsley attacks economy and untruths, lies, basically. And Newman goes in and goes like, economies, that's just prudence, right? That's legit. He's like, now it can be abused, it can be badly abused, but it is a type of prudence that you need. Economy needs to exist. And his definition is religious conduct statement, expedient and most suitable at the time for the objective at hand, but it has to maintain substantial truth. And I have a perfect example for this. I had a young lady, very nice young lady, ask me what Catholicism was, and her experience was Baptist, right? And so I go, well, we don't believe that you get saved and you go to heaven. I mean, it's not one moment and it's done, you go. We believe that you're baptized as close to birth as possible to wipe away all sin, and the rest of your life you are sinning, doing good things, sinning, doing good things, and you cannot get to heaven without the grace of God, Jesus. You have to get that, because even when you do good things, it's never enough. But Jesus will come in, fill in the cracks, fill in the flaws, and etc. And you, at the end, can make it to heaven if you have done good things and gotten there, right? The way I put it really was the way that I think somebody in one of my Sunday school classes said when I was a kid. You can't use good works to get into heaven, but you are required to act as though you can. Kind of like that. And that was a very broad painting of Catholicism. I didn't sit down to her next to her and go, well, let's talk about transubstantiation, consubstantiation, and the belief that nothing happens at all in the Eucharist in the various churches and how that all applies. And no, you don't go there right away, right? You give the great broad painting to give her an idea what Catholicism is. And yes, I understand that there were flaws in what I said, but it was a broad painting that explained it in a pretty good way, right? And that's what economy is. She wasn't ready for that discussion on transubstantiation, consubstantiation, and non-substantiation, right? But she was ready for the way I explained that. This can be abused as well. And he says very easy abuse. The insincerity and cunning can cause this to go wrong, right? If somebody wants to. And I think that's the guy who's standing there with a rattlesnake in his hand and says, this thing can bite. If it bites me, it will not kill me, and lets it bite him, right? It doesn't tell people that in the back before they brought it out. A minute before they brought it out, they milked all the poison out of it. Cleaned its fangs even, milked them again, cleaned the fangs, and then brought it out with nothing. So that when it bit, yeah, a little bit might get to him. You might feel a little sick, but he ain't gonna die, right? That's economy used the wrong way. And then he gets to untruth versus sinful lies, or lies, however you want to say it. So there are two types of untruth. You can get there with silence. You can get there with direct statements. And then he starts into the whole thing where there are just causes when you can lie. And he lists out 4 of them. He breaks it down 2 ways. Just causes when you can lie. And the first way he breaks it down is it's not a sin to tell someone an untruth when you don't have a duty of justice to them, right? So this is the assassination example, right? There's an assassin here. You can't do anything to stop him from shooting somebody on stage out there. And there's 12 women out on stage, and he goes, which one's Mary Sue? And you say, I don't know. You know full well Mary Sue's third from the left, but you are not obligated to tell him the truth that that's Mary Sue's the third one from the left so he can shoot her, right? No. So that's that example. Untruth for the sake of society. There's a terrorist standing with his hand above a trigger or a button that's going to set off a bomb that will blow up Cleveland, right? And kill 1 million people in the endeavor. And you go in, and he goes, "Is my wife alive?" And you know full well her village was destroyed the night before, and everybody was killed. And rather than telling this guy that with his hand over the button, you go, "Yes, May's alive. She's in a refugee camp. She's going to be fine. And you need to not do that, because if you hit that, we're going to strike back. She's probably not going to make it. But you need, let's stop this." That would be benefit of society. Now, I think that when they're talking about benefit of society, they may be talking things that are longer term, but that's an easy example to understand. Equivocations, words with separate meanings. He gives an example. Athanasius, Saint Athanasius, is being chased by somebody who wants to kill him in his oppression, and they're on boats, and he gets far enough ahead that they can't see him. He turns around to come back, right? And as he goes past the boat that's chasing him, they go, "Have you seen Athanasius?" And he says, "He's around here somewhere," and just keeps booking, right? And they go this way. That's an equivocation. Yeah, he's around here somewhere. He was right there, but Saint Athanasius just keeps going and gets away, right? And they go down this way looking in vain. So that's that. And frailty is the last one. This is the one where they're torturing you, and they're asking you how many lights there are, and there are 2 lights, and they're saying, "Aren't there 5?" And you go, "No, there's 2," and then they cut off a finger. "How many lights?" "There's 2." They cut off another finger, and then you just eventually go, "There's 5. There's 5." You've lied out of frailty, but that's not necessarily a sin. It is a failure, although I think this one is the closest of all those that count as a sin. There's another way that he breaks it down. There's material lies and formal lies. And he uses an analogy with murder, and he's like, okay, there's Jack the Ripper kills somebody, and that's murder straight up, right? Intent, he knew what he was doing, he's all on board, that's murder. Your executioner at a state-run execution is not. That's a formal murder. He actually kills the guy, but he's legal excuse, moral excuse, theological excuse. He is not held responsible. So that's the difference between material and formal. And he says the same thing exists in lies. You have, I go into a bank and say, "I am a rich man. Give me money," and they do. That's a material lie. I have a bank robber stick a gun in my face and say, "You got any money?" And I go, "Oh, I got nothing, man." And I have like $20,000 in my pocket. That is a formal lie. because I have no duty to this guy at all, right? So that's he kind of lays those out. You have to get in there a little bit to get that. And then he goes back and forth about whether or not how legitimate any of this is, right? He is not on board for lying. He contrasts St. Alfonso with St. Augustine. St. Augustine is, you tell the truth no matter what. I don't care if you're going to get killed because of it and other people are going to die. You stand up, you tell the truth, particularly about the faith. And St. Alfonso is like, just cause. Yeah, if you've got a reason, you can, not a basic reason. It has to be an extreme reason. But if you've got an extreme reason, yeah, you can lie. So that's what he contrasts. And he comes down on the side of St. Augustine, but he does lay out that it is actually in Catholic doctrine, not doctrine, Catholic arguments, but he lays out more along the lines of those who are with Augustine. And then he goes into the Anglican Church and goes, and here's all the people that say there can be just causes to lie and reasons to lie in the Anglican Church. And he goes through a bunch of theologians there. And then the book ends, right? It just ends there. And you're going, no wrap up? Okay, I guess we're done. So, I have to say that if I was going to tell you to read a section, it would be read the appendix, because you will get more interesting philosophical, theological arguments there than you really will anywhere else in the book. If you want to know the history of St. John Henry Newman, go look on Wikipedia or somewhere else. You will get a more concise, better explanation, and you'll get more of his life, right? You get his life after he became Catholic, too, which he did some impressive things. So that's where I stand on this. I guess I would give this book a 5 out of 10, right? It's a little difficult reading. The autobiography, while he's writing to defend his life, he downplays what he does, too, by the way. He's writing to defend his life, but it's not... And the appendix is really interesting. So that's where I stand on it. If anybody's read it before and wants to comment and talk about it some, hit the comments. I'd be interested to see it. And I'm not trying to discourage you. If you want to read it, go read it. It will enrich you. I'm just saying that the last part enriched me a lot more than the biography did. Sorry, St. Newman, wherever you are. Okay, so that's it for today. So let's do the normal stuff. If you like this, hit like, hit the bell, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified when I put these up. It is kind of irregular because I have a job and other things. Tell other people about it. That if you find any of the other ones interesting or this one interesting. Again, this has not gotten an imprimatur for anybody in the church, from the lowest hermit all the way up to Pope Leo. Nobody in the church has read and approved this and said that this is okay. I think it is, but that's me, a layperson, right? And beyond that, folks, I think that's where we're at today. I don't know what I'll be back with, but I look forward to seeing you in the future. And until then, go with God, and I'll see you next time.